Hello, my name is Emily, and I completed a sustained investigation and portfolio over the question of how relationships change as one grows up. So, for my guiding questions, I initially started with the question of how have relationships with my friends and family changed as I've grown up? And then through exploring that question, I was led to other questions such as how my priorities and responsibilities have changed as I've gotten older, and how my childhood and the past have influenced my current and future self. So, for my first piece, I really wanted to focus on exploring past friendships and how those friendships have lasting effects, as well as how over time people and promises change in a friendship. So, I really wanted to go with a burn book style. So, I started using materials like Posca markers and magazine clippings. And then I also use gouache in the background. And then another piece or another material I really wanted to use in this piece was friendship bracelets. So over to the left, I have some pictures of my sketchbook where I was researching different techniques for friendship bracelets, and then as well as figuring out a composition of how I wanted those friendship bracelets to be displayed in the piece. So to the right, I have a process image of me playing with the composition and deciding how I wanted these friendship bracelets to be displayed. So here's the final piece. I think it has that burn book style. I used the red Posca marker to make some markings on it. And then I ended up tying the friendship bracelets in a bow and having one color from each friendship bracelet kind of intertwined in the other side of the bow to symbolize how even after friendships end and people go their separate ways, they still have a piece of that friendship and an effect from the friendship. So for my next piece, I really wanted to focus on exploring the feeling of being stuck in between the past and the future and kind of that fight between moving forward and being held back for the past. So, by the past. This piece has a really interesting process because I used a new material, which was dried acrylic paint that I peeled off of paint palettes in the DSVA room. So first off, this is my initial sketch for the piece, and I was having a really hard time getting the proportions of the shoe right. So in the middle, I took a reference picture, and on my phone, I just outlined it in black, and that really helped me see the shape of the shoe better and be able to transfer that onto a sketch. Um, and then to the very right is an experiment I did with acrylic paint, and so for that, I poured acrylic paint on a piece of glass and then I let it dry. And then I poured glue over that and let it dry. And then I was able to peel that acrylic paint off in kind of like a sheet. And then I also experimented with writing on top of that, which worked out well. So here's a few more experiments I did. I decided to just use the paint pieces that came off of the palette because I thought that they had a cool like effect with the colors, but they weren't completely flat. So I put them in between the pages of a dictionary and I let them sit for like 24 hours and then they were flat. And then I was trying to decide how I wanted to use the acrylic pieces in the painting. So I explored using them at the bottom and behind the words, and I liked how they looked behind the words, but it was kind of hard to read. So after critique, I decided to use white paper as kind of like a border between the words and the paint in the background, which worked well and made the letters really pop. And then another material that I ended up using was gum wrappers to at the bottom to kind of connect with the gum on the bottom of the shoe. So here's the final piece. I'm happy with how it turned out. I think the texture is really cool in this piece because in the background, the acrylic paint gives a really good texture, and I think the gum wrappers at the bottom also do that. So my third piece, this was inspired by watching old home videos that made me super nostalgic and like sad for the past. So I watched one of my first birthday, and that kind of inspired this piece because I wanted this to be like the aftermath of an 18th birthday and looking back at like the warmth of the past, and getting older is seen in more of like adult light. So the question I was exploring is how family relationships change as you grow up. So for this piece, I really focused all of the warmth and warm colors into the TV that's kind of showing the past. And then I used um, cooler colors for the rest of the piece. So here's the final image. this is also gouache, and I did it in kind of a looser painting style that I don't normally do. So that was a cool step outside of my comfort zone. So for this next piece, I had a few questions. It was inspired first by all of this college mail that I was receiving and this giant pile of college mail that I had. So I wanted to explore how like priorities and responsibilities have changed as I've grown up and the pressures that I face as I get older. So I wanted to see how I could convey the feeling of stress and what mediums I could use to enhance the piece. So I ended up using mediums like the college mail and then also college acceptance letters. Um, I ended up using in the piece. So with the college acceptance letters, those are on the bottom right. I crumpled them up and then like pressed them against wet black gouache to kind of show the texture of the pieces or of the letters. And then this is a reference image I took for this face. And then I did the face on a separate piece of paper and ended up cutting it out. So here's the final image. There's a lot of layers to this piece. So the first is black gouache, and then the acceptance letters, and then the face on top, and then some of the cutouts from the college mail. And then I also used Posca markers in the background. So this piece is about 16 by 20 inches. And I liked having a lot of things happening to show kind of like an overwhelming feeling. So my next piece was inspired by my childhood teddy bear. So the top left, I have an image or a reference image that I took. And then I just put that image into PixArt and added a grid and a filter that kind of blocks out the colors because I used a new painting technique with this piece where I almost did it like a paint by number. I would look at a block of color and paint um, outline the shape of that color and then paint it in little blocks. So you can kind of see that process in this image here. And then I wanted initially to use this hand that I drew with crayons to kind of show a person like reaching for the stuffed animal and like almost like reaching for the past. But then after talking with Bloomer and Rice and Bach, I kind of decided not to use the hand because it didn't really fit with the piece as well as I wanted. So I then was trying to figure out a different composition and background. So I have an image here in Bloomer's room of trying to put together a new composition. So this piece is still somewhat a work in progress. This is the image that I had, but I wasn't completely happy with it. And after critique and taking some notes for here, I talked to Miss Ledbetter about using Photoshop in the background to make a new kind of like wallpaper and then add in some like shadows and different depth and colors. So we're still working on that currently. And then I also decided to scale down the piece to have more focus on the bear. And then for my next piece, this is also a work in progress because I initially started this piece a few months ago. I had this sketch and the focus for this piece was kind of like time like slipping through your fingers and like the feeling of like drowning in time. But these were my sketches, and this piece I attempted a few months ago, but I didn't like how it turned out. So I kind of scrapped the idea, but I came back to it and I redid it. I started using gouache, which I had used in the original piece, but then I decided to use markers, which is something or a material that I don't use very often. But so far, I like how it's turning out, and I'm happy with it. So reflection, given more time, I would have liked to create a few more pieces. I think I have a solid portfolio, but I had a few more ideas that I would have liked to use. And then I think doing this again, I would have planned out my pieces for a little bit longer and have had more thought out sketches before starting pieces. And then overall, I believe I was able to adequately explore the process of growing up and how life changes over time. So thank you.